Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wine.com Experiences. I'm Gwendolyn Osborn. Today, we are headed to Sonoma to experience the delicious diversity of Chardonnay in the region. This tasting is a virtual webinar for Taste of Sonoma at Home. And if you're not familiar with Taste of Sonoma, it is a fantastic annual food and wine event that allows you to experience the bounty of this gorgeous wine region. Typically, it's a full day of delicious wine, food, experiences, and with incredible people. And while you're virtual this year, it is virtual this year, if you have an inkling to travel to Sonoma, I really highly encourage you to do so during this weekend. It is scheduled to be in person next year in 2022, probably in June. Their website has a lot of information, but it is a beautiful, wonderful way to just kind of experience so much of the wine and food of this beautiful place. In the meantime, for today, we are going to bring you along to taste 3 different Chardonnay from Sonoma that will kind of give you an idea of the diversity of this one grape in Sonoma County. So if you purchase the wine ahead of time, we have these 3 Chardonnay. Please go ahead and get them open, get them into some glassware if you can. Trio is still available on Wine.com if you don't happen to have it now. A really fantastic wines. The 3 wines we are tasting in order are the Flowers Sonoma Coast Chardonnay, the Gary Farrell Russian River Valley Selection Chardonnay, and the Knightsbridge KB Estate Chardonnay. So let us welcome our guests to talk more about these wines and taste with us. From Flowers Vineyards and Winery, we have head winemaker Chantel Fortin. Got it. Okay. Hi, Chantel. Welcome. From Gary Farrell Vineyards and Winery, we have Director of Winemaking, Teresa Heredia. What am I doing? I am like butchering Heredia.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Sorry. And then Knightsbridge Winery, Director of Winemaking, Douglas Danilek. Sorry, I don't know where that better pronunciation. Thank you all so much for being here and joining us to talk about these wines and taste them with us. We're talking Sonoma, this beautiful place, delicious wines, and today we're celebrating the Chardonnay of Sonoma County and the diversity and complexity that it can give. So I would love for you each to kind of talk about what makes Sonoma such a special place for this grape. And Chantel, if you could start with that.
Of course. So the Flowers Estates are located on the extreme Sonoma coast. So our vineyards are 2 miles from the ocean at high elevation. And for Chardonnay growing out here, it lends a really kind of bright and crisp citrus profile while maintaining this, with that sunshine at high elevation, you get a really nice body to the wine, but it never loses its acid backbone. So from beginning to end, it just is really, really focused. And Chardonnay is a really transparent grape. And so all this wonderful kind of flora and fauna we have out here in the wild contribute to those really wonderful aromatics.
Perfect. Teresa, what about you? What does Sonoma speak to Chardonnay? Or how does Chardonnay speak to Sonoma?
Yeah, either way. What we talk about and what we love about Sonoma County is the diversity. It's, we have so many different microclimates within Sonoma County and within the Russian River Valley, which is predominantly where we get our grapes. So I like to talk about the neighborhoods of the Russian River Valley, which I can get into a little bit more detail later. But they all have different climates, different temperatures, different soil types, different sun exposure. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Douglas, what about you?
Sure. Among the appellations we're going to taste today, we're the easternmost part of Sonoma County in Knights Valley, which has its own special character. So as we move through the presentations, we'll go to we're the warmest among the 3 and a different flavor profile with our Chardonnay. You'll see more flavors of pear, even kumquat emerge out of Knights Valley, which is its own unique, has its own unique identity.
Yeah, I think this is so great because we've done a couple of different tastings that had Chardonnay 3 ways and different styles, and we celebrated Chardonnay Day, but everything was from a different country or state or something. And right now we have these 3 wines from one county that are really going to showcase even how just one place can have so many different places, if you will. So let's get into tasting those and talking about them. We are going to start with the Flowers Sonoma Coast Chardonnay. So Chantel, tell us a little bit about Walt and Joan Flowers' vision heading over to the Sonoma Coast, because I feel like we all kind of know Sonoma Coast now, but 25 years ago-ish, when this was their vision, it was slightly different.
Yeah, we're actually celebrating having vines in the ground for 30 years this year.
Okay.
And the image that's on the B-roll right now, that's Camp Meeting Ridge Estate. And you can kind of see in the background of the image, the Pacific Ocean. So we're at 1,500 feet in elevation, 2 miles from the ocean. And that we consider this our Chardonnay estate. And Joan and Walt Flowers were originally nursery owners in Pennsylvania. And they knew when they retired from their nursery business that they wanted to fulfill a lifelong goal, which was to plant a vineyard and start a winery. And of all places, they actually chose the extreme Sonoma Coast, which at the time there were only 6 other vineyards planted out here, and none of them are really planted to Chardonnay. And so they were really pioneering in the sense of understanding the climate and the potential for Chardonnay this close to the coast. This is an area that, it truly is wild. We're kind of where the redwoods meet the ocean. And we just happen to be planted on top of a ridge top with huge diversity of soils, which lends itself to some excellent blending potential.
Yeah, and then so Sonoma Coast, as an AVA, kind of encompasses a lot, but you are more in the Seaview, Fort Ross areas, correct? Tell us kind of what makes that space unique from just that more encompassing Sonoma Coast.
Yeah. So Sonoma Coast stretches, from kind of Marin County to Mendocino. So it's a very large area of the northern coast, and where the Flowers estates are kind of, we're about an hour and a half north of San Francisco. And then the area that you alluded to, Fort Ross Seaview, is defined by being close to the ocean and at high elevation. So what that means for growing grapes out here is that we are above that kind of classic ocean fog line. I think we'll see some photos earlier of the fog just kind of saturating the Russian River Valley. And if you can imagine that that's sitting at lower elevation, these vineyards are sitting above that fog. And so we're getting all the benefits of the cooling fog while staying in the sunshine. And that's actually what makes it possible to ripen grapes this close to the ocean, is the elevation factor.
And then, like you said, though, with the temperature and that Pacific breeze, that acidity is just completely maintained, which makes me realize we should be drinking the wine while we talk about this, right? So let's get our flowers going here, our Chardonnay, and maybe kind of as we taste through it, talk us through kind of aromas, flavors, and then as we get into its structure and maybe kind of how that's being influenced by these factors. And then eventually we'll talk a little bit about cellar choices.
Yeah. The Sonoma Coast Chardonnay, Chardonnay from areas of the Sonoma Coast that have true coastal influence always have a very specific citrus note. Depending on the vintage of the wine, the citrus can range anywhere from a lime to a mandarin. And so that is kind of indicative of how the vintage, how each year is so different out here because of the extreme nature of our climate being that close to the ocean, that those impacts actually have an impact on the aroma of the wine. But in addition to citrus, for me, it's always, there tends to be a little bit of orchard fruit, but overwhelmingly, the aromas are fresh and they're bright and they're mineral. And then when we get into kind of tasting the wine, we are in the California sunshine. And so there is a nice body to the wine, but having that acid kind of from start to finish because of that cooler climate is a hallmark of the Flowers Chardonnays. And the complexity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of those things. So when you get the grapes and you bring them to the cellar, and the winery, what are you doing to kind of maintain that acidity, but yet also kind of heighten those ripe fruit flavors?
Yeah, so we're picking so we pick at night, which is pretty key kind of in our region. We want to pick the grapes at the coolest temperatures as possible in order to have the highest integrity of the clusters. And then we put those clusters into a basket press, or sorry, a bladder press, and press really, really gently the juice away from the skins. That juice is then transferred by gravity into a stainless steel tank, and we settle that overnight. And then we transfer the juice into barrels, and carefully incorporating some of that lovely lees or the solids to kind of help retain some freshness for fermentation and keep the fermentation healthy. Something that makes Flowers unique is that we're all of our fermentations in the cellar are done with all native yeast, and so we're not adding any yeast, and we're actually not adding any additives other than a little bit of sulfur to the wine at bottling. And so it's a very hands-off winemaking process in order to really honor the sites that these grapes are being grown. And then our barrel selection, we're fermenting in primarily neutral French oak, very low new oak percentage, about 18%. And then we age for about 10 months in barrel, 10 to 12 months in barrel. And then we transfer all of the barrels into a tank and let it sit for 3 months prior to bottling. So everything is really kind of gentle, and with the idea that we're preserving that hallmark freshness that we get from being close to the ocean.
What about malolactic fermentation?
Yeah, because we're cool climate, we tend to have a lot of acidity, and so we want we want to go through malolactic fermentation in order to add some of the texture and the mouthfeel. I also think that malolactic allows for there to be more complexity in the aromas and the textures of the wine. So the goal is to have everything go through malolactic, but because it's native and we're not choosing a specific malolactic strain, you're missing all that kind of buttery richness that you would normally get when you think about California Chardonnay that goes through malolactic fermentation.
Got it. Thank you. Those are all the questions I was going to ask on like the barrel and the percentage of new versus neutral. But yeah, I feel like it all kind of comes together, and I love that idea of you put everything back in that tank for everything to kind of integrate and marinate, if you will, together.
Yeah. Well,
kind of balance out.
With all those little barrels, like they're not little barrels, but all those barrels are essentially their own fermentation vessels. So every barrel tastes unique and tastes different, and so it's really important to kind of put them all together before they are in bottle.
Well, this is delicious. I love it. It does have that bright acidity. It has a wonderful texture. That kind of, you know, I get. But when you said lime and mandarin, I'm like, oh, I get both. But but yeah, it's just beautiful with that kind of richness, but it's so well integrated in the background. So Chardonnay, fantastic food wine. What are the things you enjoy pairing with Chardonnay?
So my go-to pairing for the Flowers Chardonnay is oysters. However, it's the nice combination with the brininess and the saltiness of oysters that go with the citrus and the kind of, you know, medium richness of the wine. They both play on minerality, but I know that fresh oysters aren't available for everybody. So I think any seafood dish or roast chicken. Roast chicken is a great pairing for Chardonnay.
I always call Chardonnay also, it's kind of like the chicken of the wine world, you know, it's so diverse and takes on so many different ways. So yeah, Chardonnay and a really well done chicken is perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing this wine, and appreciate it. It's delicious. So we are going to move on to the Russian River Valley with Teresa and Gary Farrell. Teresa, Gary Farrell Winery is almost 40 years old and has quite the legacy in the Russian River. Can you tell me a little bit about, I guess, what was the draw 40 years ago to the Russian River Valley for Gary Farrell back then?
Good question. It's a stunning region. And as you can see in the photo, the Russian River is the key defining characteristic of the Russian River Valley. And the reason being that it acts like a conveyor belt. It pulls the fog from the Pacific Ocean through the Russian River Valley and through all the vineyards that are surrounding the river. And this is really what makes it a beautiful region for growing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So we source vineyards like Rocchioli, for example. The Rocchioli family started here, Rocchioli, Bacigalupi. They started here as pioneers in the really early days, and nobody really had vineyard designates at the time. And so Joe Rocchioli Jr. Had the goal of growing varietals, so growing Pinot Noir and making individual vineyard selections from those grapes instead of growing mass quantities of grapes and shipping them to Central Valley to make jug wine. And so that was his vision, and he made it work. And so we refer to all these guys, Joe Rocchioli, Gary Farrell, Joseph Swan, so many, Davis Bynum. These are all the names that made the Russian River Valley famous. And so I think that was really the draw. They saw the wines from France, for example, getting so much recognition, and they saw the climate here and the soil, the diversity of soil here, where, we talk about how there are more soil types in Sonoma County than there are in all of France. So it's pretty incredible when you think about what this region has to offer in terms of, exciting wine differentiation. So that's what the draw was. And in the winery, it's incredible. The brand has been around since 1982.
Right. 40 next year. So speaking of that, and you're talking about the soils and that diversity, tell us a little bit, you touched on it before, that the idea of that neighborhoods of Russian River. Explain what you mean.
Right. So I talk about the diversity and the soil, the different soil types, the different climate types, the fog, the sun exposure, different elevations. We can talk about so many differences in this region, but in order to help educate ourselves and to educate consumers, we started talking about a decade ago. Wine growers and wineries started talking about these different regions within the Russian River Valley, not intended to be sub-appellations of the Russian River Valley down the road. They're just, it's an educational tool to help explain the different climates and the different soil types in the region. So we work with about 5 different neighborhoods within the Russian River Valley. Where Gary Farrell Winery is located, which is in the northernmost part of the Russian River Valley. We're in the region called the Middle Reach. And it is most of the vineyard. We're talking about Rocchioli and Bacigalupi as 2 big examples. The vineyards are located just adjacent to the river, and so the temperatures there are moderated. It gets warm here during the day, and as Chantal was saying, you get the intense sunshine during the day. But then at night, the Russian River pulls the fog in and helps to chill the grapes down at night and helps to really retain ample natural acidity. So you're getting the richness, that concentration, the golden characteristics that people are looking for sometimes when they want a California Chardonnay. But then you have Green Valley, which is out west. It's a much cooler climate. You're getting more minerality. And then the Santa Rosa Plains, you get kind of opulence and density, but really bright acidity. That's where our Pellegrini vineyard is located. And Sebastopol Hills is the coolest region of the neighborhoods. It's very similar to Green Valley, but it's also nestled next to the Petaluma wind gap. So not only are you getting chilly temperatures, but also windy conditions. And so those are really kind of the key neighborhoods that we work with.
Yeah, and I know that this wine is a blend of all of them, or just a few of them.
Just a few. So our Pinot Noir is a compilation of all the neighborhoods that we get, but our Chardonnay predominantly comes from the Santa Rosa Plains and the Middle Reach.
Got it. Okay.
So Santa Rosa Plains is the flat area.
Right. So let's taste through this wine as it's blend, and maybe kind of lead us through it of some of the aromas and flavors, and of course the structure, and maybe kind of draw in some of the choices you are making in the cellar as we discuss that we might be seeing and smelling and tasting.
Right. So, okay. So this wine is a blend of about 15 different vineyards from around Sonoma County, predominantly from the Russian River Valley. So some of the characteristics that you get are going to be citrus. And I like to talk about Meyer lemon, because Meyer lemon, when you buy them at the store, when they're really ripe and juicy and delicious, they can almost have an orange color to them. And so one of our biggest contributors to the blend is our Pellegrini Olivet Lane Vineyard, right there in the heart of the Santa Rosa Plains. And it's cold at night. It's a flat area, cold at night. So ample acidity, bright, fresh, crisp Meyer lemon. That's one of the flavors that I like to use to describe this wine. But when you talk about the grapes that come from the warmer part of the Russian River Valley, like Rocchioli and Bacigalupi, you're getting richer, maybe roasted Meyer lemon and some hints of tropical characteristics. So when you taste this wine, you're getting this beautiful, intense richness, you know, the warmth of a California Chardonnay that people want when they're looking for a California Chardonnay, but you're getting that really juicy, vibrant, bright acidity and all these aromatics that pop out of the glass because of the different neighborhoods and the different vineyards that we work with. 15 different incredible vineyards.
Yeah.
It's fun
Kind of
making
like,
this wine.
yeah, it's like the Meyer lemon curd with like in a custard, or I mean, like, or in like a, with a bread, you know, just like that baked kind of richness
Yes.
that comes with the lemon. So,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I love lemon.
So do I. So
So
you're
when you get
sipping.
into the cellar, you're picking the grapes. Tell us a little bit about your choices during with malolactic fermentation and tanks and oak.
Mm-hmm. So during the harvest, we receive all of the grapes. We work with 36 different vineyards in total. So we have, you know, during harvest, constant delivery of grapes coming, but we keep them all separate. We have a refrigerated trailer to chill the grapes down after we receive them. Sometimes we hold them until the next morning so we can really get them nice and cold. And most all of our grapes are picked at night so that we can receive them nice and cold. And if possible, we put them into the press immediately as soon as we get them. And we have a bladder press that we use. It's a Euro press, and we dial in the pressing techniques specifically tailored to the qualities of the fruit at the time of harvest. So bigger, juicier clusters like Clone 4, for example, I would use a slightly more aggressive pressing program where you get different pressure changes and more rotations in the press to kind of, you know, break things up inside. All of our Chardonnays are whole cluster pressed. So then on the flip side, if I'm dealing with something like our Durrell vineyard, which is notorious old Wente selection, notoriously tiny clusters and tiny berries, you've already got that natural concentration. So I use a gentle champagne pressing program for that. And there are fewer pressure changes and fewer rotations. We're dialing in to try and get as much solids as we can to express the vineyard naturally, but we don't want to be overly aggressive. So after the pressing is finished, the juice settles overnight, and we're targeting a specific percent solid. So we have a little machine. It's a turbidity meter that we use to measure the percent solids. And if everything's just right, if our acidity is spot on, the percent solids is spot on, sometimes we just mix the tank and transfer it straight to 30% new French oak, light toast barrels, almost entirely light toast barrels.
Okay, but are
and
you
our
fermenting
wines
all in barrels and just 30% new? Everything else?
That's correct.
Okay.
With a minor exception, every now and again, we may ferment something in stainless steel for blending purposes. We have a concrete egg that holds about 475 gallons, and we do ferment in that each year and take a good chunk of it to go into the Russian River selection.
Got it. Okay, perfect. And then, so after fermentation, aging, how much do you do?
Yep. So about 8 to 9 months of aging in barrel on primary lees, and we don't rack anything until about a month before bottling.
Got it.
We rack everything out of barrel, make the blend, and then our Chardonnays all get put into bottle in the month of June.
Fantastic.
Malolactic fermentation, 100%.
100%. Got it.
100%. For the similar reason that Chantal was explaining. The way we pick, my picking decisions are generally on the earlier side of the ripeness spectrum because we're trying to capture purity and a sense of place. And when you pick early, you're starting with a baseline of really crisp, vibrant aromatics and flavors and really bright acidity. And so to tone that down a little bit and get some of that creaminess, you want to put it through malolactic fermentation. So that's what we do.
And I learned at a Chardonnay seminar, including David Ramey, several years back, of just that 100% Malo can actually integrate it more than sometimes, not necessarily partial, depending on what it is, but just that just because it's 100% doesn't mean it's going to be over the top. It often adds complexity and that wonderful texture. So delicious. I can't
Depends on your starting baseline. He is.
Yes. Chardonnay master. So food, what do you enjoy eating with this kind of wine?
So one of my favorite pairings with our Chardonnay generally is mushroom risotto. And I think that the Chardonnay is beautiful because it has the richness to pair with the richness of the risotto, but it also has plenty of acidity to cut through it. And the earthiness of the mushrooms is a beautiful pairing as well.
I've not had risotto in so long. Thank you. That is So thank you so much, Teresa. Delicious, delicious wine. So we are going to move into the Knights Valley with the Knights Bridge Estate Chardonnay. So Douglas, tell me a little bit about the terroir of your location, or the climate, the soils, the differences here in Knights Valley, and why this spot kind of works for Chardonnay.
Absolutely, thank you. One of the distinctive features of Knights Valley, it's the easternmost Chardonnay appellation in Sonoma County. And if you were to take a bird's eye view from the ocean, you would see Flowers, for example, I'm sure covered in fog for a good part of the day, the Russian River with fog retreating. And for us, it lasts really just a few hours in the morning. However, what that means for us is we have bigger diurnal shifts, which means our nighttime temperatures are very, very cold. So like my colleagues, we pick our fruit at night and temperatures will dip down into 45 degrees. So you really have to come prepared when you pick in the evening. One of the really distinctive features of Knights Valley is we're only the second winery. We are plan to open our new winery, which is very exciting, this October. And there's only 2 wineries in the entire appellation of Knights Valley. And what makes it distinctive is within our property, we have at least 3 different soil types that we can identify clearly. And the expression of Chardonnay off each one of those sites is very, very distinctive. And combination of clone, exposure, row orientation, and soil type really have an enormous influence in creating sort of a great palette of things to blend with. And the wine we're going to taste today is exactly that. It's taken from several different parcels on our property and blended together for the KB wine. And what I love about it is that it's a great sort of introduction to Sonoma County Chardonnay. It's a great introduction to Knights Valley and our property. We also have Chardonnays that range above this selection that we encourage people to come explore. But, again, being the warmest among our panelists today, one of the things I think we see more fruits like ripe pear. Sometimes we even see kumquat, a little bit more ripeness in terms of the character. We do retain acidity, not as well as far on as the far Sonoma coast, but obviously acidity is a hallmark of Chardonnay if it has any potential, both as young and.
And you've been with Knightsbridge since the beginning here in Knights Valley. So how has that evolved over the years? And has Chardonnay always been one of the main focus points for the winery?
Yes, indeed, it has. So what's nice about when we acquired the property in 2006, 2007 is that there was an established vineyard already on the property, which has a mixture of young and old vines. And we made a very conscious effort to adopt a European model of retaining those old vines and taking very good care of them while replanting new sections with newer clonal material so that we would have this diversity of clone, diversity of vine age, and in that way build really more complete Chardonnays.
Yeah, so let's taste through this. And I know you have several years of training in Burgundy as well. So I'd love to kind of also hear about kind of what you took from there into what you're doing here, since you've been there since 2006 as well. But maybe talk us through tasting this wine of how it reflects that place, that warmer climate, and then those older vines that you've kind of taken in and other choices made in the cellar.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the common themes that we've heard throughout today's presentation is that Chardonnay is transparent. And I think as winemakers, we really want to respect the expression of place where it comes from. And we never want the winemaker's imprint to be too forceful and too strong. So when you taste this wine, one of the things you'll see is we want it to speak of our estate, our Knightsbridge place. And I think that's a hallmark of all Chardonnay winemaking. Good Chardonnay winemaking is you want the place to speak first. And we don't look for fermentative elements to be too bold or too dominant. That is to say, a lot of oak or excess sort of lee stirring or malolactic characters that take away from the purity of the varietal or the sense of place. So we're very, very mindful about how we handle the wine and making sure that all those things that we do add, like for example, if we're adding oak or if we're taking the wine through malolactic, we're doing it in a way, in a very measured way, where the fruit and place are always going to shine.
Yeah, because you mentioned that both Chantel and Teresa were saying just how cool their climates were, and so certain choices they made had to do with that, intense acidity and those cooler. And you're coming from a warmer climate, which means different choices are made to kind of balance everything out. So fermentation, does it take place in tanks or barrels?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we have to focus on in a slightly warmer spot, I mean, we're still cool, but one of the things we have to focus on is, of course, harvesting at night to preserve the freshness of the fruit, but also very gentle pressing, right? So a lot of the bitter fractions of Chardonnay and white wine will come out with excessive pressure. So for us to make wines that have sort of great delicacy and sense of place, we might squeeze to maybe 130 gallons out of each ton of grapes, whereas larger wineries might reach up to 160 gallons out of each ton of grapes. And so the gentle pressing is a real key to preserving quality and ageability at the same time. Secondly, we go to France every year. I had the good fortune in my internship to work with coopers in Burgundy. And so each year we go to France and select our wood, not only on the forest level, sub-forest level, but work with the coopers to get the toast levels just exactly where we want them for each one of our vineyard blocks. And I think that's key to keep the expression of place intact. I mean, oak can be a wonderful framework. It can obviously be overused, as we've seen in many cases, but our key is using really the very finest French oak from specific coopers, specific forests every year to match our blocks. And then as we're using the barrels, we're also mindful of when we're doing any stirring of the barrels, that happens exclusively after the malolactic is done, right? So that you don't build up too much of what we talked about earlier, the fermentative flavors of the popcorn or the excess butter. Those are things that will emerge from Chardonnay in the glass after 10 years as subtle notes. Let it sit rather than become something in the forefront of the wine. So, it's a magical grape to work with because it has so many expressions in Sonoma County based on climate, soils, and handling. I think one of the common threads we've heard today is how much all our colleagues respect the grape to preserve its sense of place.
Yes, it is. I think that's a beautiful way of saying that. It takes so much from the soils and the climate and the handling. It's that kind of malleable in a way, but also one that you just don't want to touch too much because you've got to let it shine on its own. So it's beautiful, yet I guess tricky in that way. But so is this all new oak? Do you use a percentage of old for this particular wine, the estate wine?
So we use about 30%. It's all French oak. And then the balance of it is more neutral oak. So we want it to be sort of seamlessly integrated in the wine. You don't want it standing out. You want it to just perfectly sort of hold and caress the wine and make it something that is a complement to the wine, but never an ornament.
Yeah, and this is tasting this next to these other wines, I definitely do get that riper fruit. I love kumquat. I grew up with a neighbor with a kumquat tree, so it brings back memories. But yeah, that riper, richer kind of character, but still well balanced, very well integrated, and all of these just have a phenomenal finish that I'm just really enjoying. But they each kind of are so very unique. What about you for choosing food with a Chardonnay?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that when you live in Burgundy, you really don't drink wine very much outside of table, right? It's all designed for what are you going to enjoy this wine with. And I think one of the things that we're rediscovering about Chardonnay as a grape is that in Burgundy, for example, if you have a great vineyard, you don't open it up before 10 years of age, which I think surprises a lot of people. And that these wines can age into something magnificent at, year 3, year 5, year 10, and even beyond. And so when I think of food with our Knightsbridge Chardonnay, one of the things I love is roast chicken is a great choice, but also I love Jacques Pepin's soufflé, which is this super simple, just mild amount of herbs. And it really, sometimes these simple preparations just make Chardonnay really shine in those venues. So yeah, Seafood Tower and Jacques Pepin's soufflé are my go-tos.
There you go. And Teresa's clapping. Yeah, I mean, I think that, this is simplicity in the way that it's one grape, but it's just done so well. So in that kind of sense, it's almost like with food, even just one ingredient like chicken or a simple souffle, but just done really well, with the best of the raw ingredients, you're going to have a beautiful match. So thank you so much. I do, to finish up, I kind of want to talk about travel and visiting, because I love hanging out with you and tasting virtually, but I think that there are many who just really look forward to being somewhere and visiting, and especially going to wine country. And so for those who might want to plan trips and visit Sonoma, I kind of want to talk about your wineries and how they might look in the coming year. So Chantel, can you tell us a little bit about Flowers and how visitors can get the best experience coming to see you?
Yes. Well, frankly, up until about 2 years ago, you couldn't come see us. So we purchased a 15-acre property just outside of Healdsburg on West Side Road, and took about 2 years to remodel the grounds and the building. And we call this our House of Flowers. So beautiful sprawling gardens, among some Pinot Noir vines in the Middle Reach portion of the Russian River Valley. And we are pouring our estate wines at House of Flowers, and along with the wines come some highly curated pairings from our estate culinary team. And it's also a little bit of a choose your own adventure. So you come, there's probably 8 or 10 different places within the house or the gardens that you can sit and enjoy and relax. And we're open 5 days a week. Reservations are definitely recommended, but not required. And we're open and we're ready to see you. So please come visit.
I remember this kind of coming to fruition, and then all of a sudden, boom, right after COVID. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And driving to where your vineyards are is a huge trek. So as much as it's nice to be where the vineyards are, I think it's fantastic that you are somewhere people can get to and really experience the Flowers experience there.
Yeah, it's been a treat. I think it's one of those things that everybody has a story of the first time they had flowers, and to be able to do that on our own property and watch people's reactions is really special.
That's fantastic. That's great. Well, I can't wait to come visit.
Please come.
No, I'm totally well. I'm planning my trip as we're speaking. Yes. So Gary Farrell, Teresa, I think that you finished a renovation recently at the Gary Farrell Winery. What can visitors expect when they come there?
So we are just south of Flowers, actually, on West Side Road. So you could pop into Flowers and Gary Farrell. And I highly recommend that you do, to get the full experience. So we are open 7 days a week. We have this newly remodeled tasting room. That's the outdoor terrace. That's the new furniture. We were remodeled. The remodel was complete in July of 2017. So we've been open since then. We're offering both indoor and outdoor seatings, but everybody's sitting outside right now because it's so beautiful. The weather is just perfect. So we're offering on-site tastings as well as private virtual tastings. So, people can look online and decide what they want to do. we've harnessed and embraced the virtual tastings because we can have so many different visitors and they don't have to spend the money to travel here if they don't want to. So that's still we're going to continue to offer those.
Us too. That's what we're doing. We're like, yes, we can talk to so many people, and they but I know people do want to travel, so it's a wonderful place to visit. So Douglas, I know that the winery is planned to open in October, but you are open now, and where you are is the winery, correct?
Yes, so right now I'm in the Calistoga tasting room, which is right on Main Street in Calistoga. And as you can see behind me, interestingly, this is the old bank building in Calistoga, built in the late 1800s. And the bank issued its own currency way back when. And why they put the vault on the second floor in earthquake and fire country, we always ask that question. But as you can see, it keeps our wine safe and secure and aging beautifully. And the tasting room is open 7 days a week for those who want to come visit in Calistoga. And then very exciting news on our front is that we have the winery opening in Knights Valley in October. It will be open to the public. I think it's beautiful in that they have fit it right into the landscape. It's a really, really beautiful setting, very bucolic. And the owners have also had the vision to hold on to all vintages of all of our wines so that we can offer limited library selections to everyone who comes to visit. So not only to the viewers today, but my colleagues, I wanted to say that the door is wide open. Please come visit. We would love to see you. It is, of course, by appointment, as most wineries are these days. So please do call in advance. But we promise you a great experience and to enjoy the beautiful bucolic setting of Knights Valley.
Delicious. Yeah, I can't wait to get back up to Sonoma again. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you at home for joining us. I hope you have learned that Chardonnay from one place can be this diverse. It can be this delicious and complex and interesting. You've learned that you should visit Sonoma and go to all these wineries, and that Taste of Sonoma is an extremely fantastic experience that next year will be live, but now it's virtual. They actually have a few things on their website, including a red tasting we will be hosting in 2 weeks, which you can sign up for on Wine.com and buy the wines. These Chardonnay, if you don't have them, are still available on Wine.com, and definitely encourage you to get them, because tasting them side by side is fantastic. Yeah, that's it. Taste of Sonoma. Visit, go. Thank you all so much for these wines and these stories. It's been pleasurable and delightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
It's both a science and a form of high art. It's made from the combination of grapes, sunlight, rain, soil, and time. It's raised up in the moments that matter. It's wine. And we are Wine.com. We have the largest wine selection in the world, online sommeliers with free advice, and now our powerful new app puts the entire world of wine in your hands. Wine.com. Seriously passionate about wine. Download our free app today.